Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning. Welcome to Indiana, All Indiana Politics. I'm Richard Essex. We start with President Biden's new scaled-back domestic policy agenda. The $1.75 trillion spending plan includes free pre-K and climate change initiatives. What it does not include is some key points from the presidential campaign, like paid family leave and free community college.
We spent hours and hours and hours over months and months working on this. No one got everything they wanted, including me. But that's what compromise is. That's consensus. And that's what I ran on.
Let's welcome in Mike Small, the chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party. How are you today? Thanks for coming back on the program. We're going to talk about the president's spending plan. The president has called this historic, but what's it mean for the state of Indiana?
You know, it would be a huge investment, Richard, for hardworking Hoosiers, families, and kids. You know, I think far too often the debates in Washington talk about corporate tax breaks and how much we're going to tax certain individuals or things like that. And this is really a package that delivers for families. You know, I think you see huge historic investments in tackling the climate crisis, things that would bring more jobs to Indiana, things that would invest in childcare facilities and workers across the state. There's a huge childcare shortage in the Hoosier state. Investments in things that would help our ag community, like rural broadband internet, not to mention roads, bridges, infrastructure, all of those things. So, you know, our country needs this investment, and it truly is historic.
Now, this does not have full Democratic support. How confident are you that this is even that it's gonna pass?
You know, yeah, there's not huge majorities for the Democrats, obviously on Capitol Hill, but you know, the process is always the process, and it's all being made out there in Washington. But what I've seen over the last few months since Joe Biden's been president is he's putting forward policies that, number one, are popular with the vast majority of Americans, and number two, deliver for folks. You know, these are bread and butter issues, everyday issues, where people will see a difference in their daily lives. And I think that far too often the debates on Capitol Hill and in DC and our politics are kind of a race to the bottom and attacks and personal attacks. And I think folks are tired of that. It's exhausting. These are packages that will deliver for folks. And I think, you know, right out of the gate in the spring, Joe Biden and Democrats passed the American Rescue Plan. Now it's time to pass the rest of the Build Back Better agenda. And I think that is going to get our country on really strong footing, not just for the years ahead, but for the next generation.
Now, there have been some things that have been dropped from this. Is it a mistake for the president to let things like free community college escape this plan?
You know, there's so much, I think, to tackle any given day in our state and in our country. And, you know, I think that's actually a healthy part of our democratic process. Not everybody gets what they want, and it should sort of be that way in politics. You know, I took this role back in March because I really felt that Indiana needed to be a more balanced and a more fair state, and kind of have a level playing field, for Democrats and Republicans at the federal, state, and local level. I think that hearty exchange of ideas is healthy in any democracy and in any government. And so, you know, not everybody's going to get what they want, and that's okay. You know, the other thing that I'm looking at, Richard, is that bipartisan infrastructure package. You know, 19, I believe, Republican senators, including Mitch McConnell, voted for this package. You know, now that is going to the House. I'm hopeful that a big package like that also gets through in bipartisan fashion, because I think that would send a strong signal to Hoosiers and Americans that we can still get things done in this country.
Mike, we appreciate your time today. Mike Small, the chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party, joining us on the program this morning. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And now we welcome in 8th Congressional District Larry Bucshon, who's on the road. How are you, Congressman?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Now, have you had a chance to take a look at the president's spending plan?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things in there And it's not about the dollar amount, actually. It's about some of the programs that they want to put in place. You know, they want to create some new entitlement programs with college education and preschool and all kinds of things that they want to do that will give really more big government control over our everyday lives. So, you know, there's a whole plethora of things in there that I think we can't, number one, we can't afford. Number two, creates more of a federal government control really of almost our everyday lives from the time we're little kids all the way through adulthood. So I don't think this is going to get across the finish line, and you won't see any Republican support.
Now, we heard from the chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party just a little while ago. He is calling the president's plan historic and one that a vast majority of Americans want. How can he sell that here in Indiana?
Well, actually, the vast majority of Americans don't know what's in it. The polling shows that less than 10% of the people actually know what's in it. And when you do start to explain what's there, they don't support it in large numbers. We have polling that shows that. So, first of all, I would disagree that the American people support it. They don't know what's in it because the Democrats don't want people to know exactly what's in it. But let me just tell you this. If you want to have the federal government intruding in your daily life from the time you're a little kid all the way till the end of your life, go for this. And the other thing is, if you want to continue to lay this kind of debt on your children and grandchildren, go for this. But it's not, first of all, it's not necessary spending. It's, you know, I don't like to use the term socialism, but what I like to use is the term big government control. And that's what this is about. And, you know, I mean, I understand that Democrats favor this type of thing, but you have to understand also the people leading this are really the left of the Democrat Party, because Bernie Sanders wrote this and he's a known socialist. So I don't think that's correct that the vast majority of American people support it once they know what's in it.
Yeah, some of the progressives have indicated that they are not supporting this. But as we go into the midterm elections, it could be, do you think this is going to be something that's going to help Republicans or something that the president will use as a bully club going into the midterms?
Well, I think what's going to help Republicans is the fact that under this current administration, there's rampant inflation, gas prices are up, grocery prices are up, and that's what affects everyday Americans. When you look at overall polling of the American people, those are the number one issues, you know, inflation and pricing and what affects their everyday lives. The other thing is the immigration situation at the southern border is a big problem for the administration because they have an open border policy and most of the American people don't support it. So I think it's going to be economic issues. And honestly, this bill that they're talking about doesn't solve those problems. Actually, it makes it worse by putting more government money into the system and worsening our inflation. And then their energy policies are just going to drive up energy costs. You know, he comes into office and immediately stops oil and gas drilling on public lands, blocks pipelines, and then asks OPEC for us to import more imported oil rather than making it ourselves. So it's going to be the economy that's going to be important in this election.
One quick question before we let you go. I know that you're out traveling around. Is there anything that you've heard, you're out traveling, talking to people, any common ground that you can see in this plan with Republicans and the president?
Well, separate from the reconciliation plan, which there really isn't much common ground, the infrastructure part of this. And it's unfortunate that they won't separate that from their partisan bill. Yes, people want bridges, roads, rural broadband, big issue in my district. And I want all those things. So, yeah, I think there's room for common ground. And I'm hopeful we can get there on a big infrastructure package. But right now, it's pretty much tied to the reconciliation spending package, which most people don't support and won't get any Republican votes.
Congressman, thank you very much for your time this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. Anytime.
Larry Bucshon, thank you, sir. Coming up, a leading voice in the fight to protect the environment here in Indiana is stepping down. We'll talk to him next on All Indiana Politics. Indiana politics. A big focus of the Biden plan has been on climate change. Indiana is about to say farewell to a leader in the fight to protect Indiana's environment. Jesse Carabanda is stepping down as the executive director of the Hoosier Environmental Council. He's been on the job for 14 years, and he's with our Phil Sanchez.
Let's welcome in Jesse Carabanda now. Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations on moving on from your current position. If you look back on the last few years, specifically the last 14 that you've been in that role, what are some of your accomplishments? What are you most proud of?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And it's hard to boil it down, right, to look past 14 years. But I would say that being able to make environmental progress in a very hard to change state when it comes to public policy is probably the most noteworthy thing. And winning legislative victories in the Indiana General Assembly that have ultimately led to the protection of our public health, anti-environmental laws that could have become enacted were defeated, and HEC played an incredible role in that happening.
Expand upon that a little bit. Get into some of your biggest disappointments, some of the things that you couldn't get through that you wish you did.
Well, in terms of victories, what most stands out is, again, efforts to, there's been a trend in our society in our legislative process to try to eliminate the ability for local governments to better protect our environment in ways that are stronger than the state government. And thankfully, we have defeated some of those measures. Those are noteworthy victories. But in terms of setbacks, I think what most stands out is the bill that was passed earlier this year, SB 389, having to do with wetlands, in which Indiana made a huge step backwards in eliminating protections for a whole class of wetlands. You might say, well, why do those matter? Well, wetlands do a fantastic job in terms of reducing flood risks, in terms of purifying our water and providing a habitat for birds. And for all those reasons, you would think we would want to spend more time protecting our wetlands. And yet we've done the opposite through that passage of that bill.
Environmentally speaking, what's the outlook for our state here in the Hoosier State?
It's positive in the sense that we've got entrepreneurs, whether it's young people at the forefront of climate action or whether it's traditional entrepreneurs such as scientists working out of the incubation hubs at Purdue that are helping to decarbonize the state and to develop technologies that would decarbonize the state. But the problem is that our public policy isn't matching the kind of spirit of innovation that we're seeing in these entrepreneurs. Instead, what we often find ourselves doing when it comes to the legislative process is actually trying to stop bills from being passed that would be a setback to our air, land, and water.
You're gearing up for a big event called the Greening of the State House. What is that? Explain that to our viewers.
Sure. It's the largest annual environmental gathering in Indiana. We've been doing it. This will be our 14th year. And it's an opportunity where people across the state can network and learn about leading environmental issues. So some of the topics we'll be covering will be solar energy, climate change, wetlands protection, environmental justice, and folks will get exposed to leading experts in all those different topic areas through this conference. And thankfully, this year it's going to be a virtual one, obviously to keep everyone safe. And folks can register at hecweb.org/GTS. Before
you leave your position, if you can only leave Governor Eric Holcomb with one message, what would it be?
Have a meaningful relationship with the environmental community. It's a vibrant community. It's a community that expands across the political spectrum. And it is the kind that can address the very core objectives of the governor to make the state have a higher quality of life, draw in more economic investment. And so develop a council of advisors in the environment that the governor meets directly with. I think that would be a fantastic process change to ultimately get to better public policy in Indiana.
Jesse Karbonda, thank you very much for taking some time. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two of our favorites, Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Brian Gadde. The big story this weekend is the president's new framework. Brian, is this the plan that finally passes the House and the Senate?
I believe it is. There have been negotiations. Obviously, President Biden's been on the Hill with Speaker Pelosi and and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, trying to work out the different factions within our party. Obviously, we have the progressives in our party, as well as the moderate senators, Senator Sinema of Arizona and Senator Manchin of West Virginia. And I think we're going to get the package hammered out. There's some things that have been taken out, obviously, like community college, free 2-year community college. Some other things have been pared back. But overall, we Democrats know we've got to get this passed, because we know once we get it passed, it's going to benefit all Americans, and it's going to make our case for maintaining control of Congress that much stronger. So we're going to get it done, and we will definitely get it done.
Whitley?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As I stated before, the Democratic Party is currently splintering. The progressives are trying to run as far to the left as possible, and they can't come to a consensus on their own bill. So you have Democratic congressmen who disagree with what the president has proposed. This is before you get the Republicans who consistently disagree with President Biden and the administration's plans. And as we're currently saying from his Great American Rescue Plan, we're not feeling very rescued as a people. Inflation is ridiculous. Gas prices are up. You're going to stores and not finding things on the shelves. You have the Great Resignation of 4.3 Americans resigning in August. We are not on the track where we need to be spending this kind of money. And if we are going to be spending this kind of money, what we shouldn't be doing is cutting things like community college. How do you build back better while limiting educational opportunities and community college experiences for people? I'm just not understanding when the Democrats advocate for education on one hand and then in a plan like this completely remove it. I know that they lied to the American people. I didn't think that they were lying to each other when they got into office.
Brian,
well, first of all,
is it a mistake for the president to give up on the free child care and community college portion of this plan?
I don't think it's a mistake, because I really believe that we have to put together a package that's going to pass. And we know we're doing investments in broadband. I mean, look at the investments we're going to make with broadband are going to help in rural areas. I mean, Republicans talk about lying. Republicans claim that they represent rural Americans, but they don't do anything for rural Americans. If you look at the investment that broadband is going to happen. I mean, look at Miami County. I'll just give you that as an example. They're taking some of the rescue plan money and investing it in infrastructure in that county of our great state of Indiana. So Republicans always talk about trying to help rural Americans, but when it comes time to put their money where their mouth is, as usual, they don't back up what they have to say. So the lying really is actually
Whitley, the president says this entire plan is paid for. Is it?
No, and the previous question was about education and free childcare, and we somehow got back onto broadband. And the truth is, Democrats don't care about our education, and it's proof in the pudding in this plan. And is the plan paid for? Absolutely not. He's going to have to raise taxes, or if he attempts to not raise taxes, the inflation will continue to rise and Americans will feel it in our pockets worse than we do now. And so currently, I think that this plan is just a bunch of left-wing hogwash that needs to be completely scrapped and redone, and maybe getting people at the table that have different ideas than President Biden and his administration would be beneficial for the American people.
Well, what's the Republican plan? The usual millions of tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. They don't have a plan. You know, the only thing scarier than seeing President Trump out trick-or-treating, which would be a very scary thought, or him possibly running for president again, which won't happen, which we hopefully won't happen, is the Republicans coming up with their own plan. That would be the scariest thing on this Halloween weekend, where Republicans having a plan. I think we would all probably pass out from shock, because they don't have any plan. All they do is sit and denigrate the plans we Democrats come up with. But
Brian, we're going to give Whitley the last 15 seconds. Sorry to cut you off, Brian, but Whitley.
America overwhelmingly voted for a president who has no clue how to govern. He cannot plan and has no idea how to get us out of this pandemic and how to boost our economy back up.
Well, he's trying to recover.
Thank you very much,
Trump's
both of you.
disasters.
This has been a fantastic conversation. Whitley Yates, thank you. Brian Gaddy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here right next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can find our new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a fantastic weekend.